1937, Whig senators came up with perhaps the most creative things to do when you're losing a debate. Instead of doing the normal thing and conceding or trying to argue harder, they simply refused to vote. Thus, the bill was simply unable to pass. And with this, the US filibuster was born. Ballotpedia explains to us in an article published in 2021 that the modern filibuster is essentially a vote to vote. Indeed, this is strange in and of itself. However, how many senators are required to vote makes it even stranger. As the article goes on to explain, in order to even vote, a supermajority of 60 senators need to vote in order to vote. And this, in and of itself, leads to some problems. Given that the filibuster is linked to some of the major delays in American bills and government processes, and that this could affect the lives of millions of Americans, it becomes imperative that we discuss today's question. Should the US get rid of or reform the filibuster? And the answer is that the US needs to entirely remove the filibuster because it harms the government structure. First, because it reduces actual political deliberation. Second, because it leads to a decrease in productivity. And finally, because it is fundamentally undemocratic. The entire process of a Senate, including its mission statement, is that they have to debate on bills. However, the filibuster simply takes this away, which brings us to the first reason why the filibuster needs to be rid of, because it reduces actual political deliberation. Researchers at the Northeastern University in January of this year told us that the filibuster was originally intended at increasing political deliberation by increasing the time it takes to vote. However, as the University of Chicago concluded also in January of this year, this isn't how the filibuster played out. Instead, politicians put aside the need to actually debate on key issues. When you don't need to vote, why do you need to debate on an issue? Instead of actually arguing and talking over an essential piece of legislation, senators instead just refuse to vote. And the result of this could actually be extremely dangerous for democracy. As the National Public Radio explains to us in an article published in 2020, essentially taking away senators' need to debate and deliberate over topics takes away an aspect of political responsibility, because senators no longer actually need to talk about a topic and instead could just refuse to vote. This essentially takes away all the responsibility they have over the passing or failing of a bill. Americans often complain about their politicians not doing much. However, the filibuster simply takes this to another level, which brings us to the second reason why the filibuster needs to be eliminated, because it leads to a lack in productivity. Indeed, as Roll Call explains to us in an article published just last year, the filibuster has been linked to a severe lack in productivity from US senators. Because senators don't have to actually vote on or even debate a bill and instead could just refuse to vote, this takes away much of their entire job. As the article goes on to explain, over the past few decades, the senators that have been filibustering more are also been shown to actually do less work. And this is just getting worse and worse. Vox tells us in an article published in 2020 that the US has been increasingly using the filibuster in more and more important pieces of legislation until recently almost every single major piece of legislation has been filibustered. As a result of this, the article goes on to explain that the US Senate has become excruciatingly slow at actually getting things done, and the effects of which could be devastating. As the Washington Post explains to us in 2021, things like COVID relief bills, which were essential to the lives of so many Americans, got stuck in the Senate because of the filibuster. Who knows how many thousands of lives that these bills could have saved had they actually been passed sooner. Democracy was born more than 2,000 years ago in this ancient city of Athens. Although much has changed, some things remain constant about it, which brings us to the third reason why the filibuster needs to be removed, because it is fundamentally undemocratic. As UN Archives explains last decade, the idea of a democracy is the will of the people and the majority. Indeed, in an ideal democracy, the will of the majority of the people should come first and become law. However, this is not what happens in countries or systems that have a filibuster. Essentially, the Brennan Organization explains to us that the filibuster allows a small minority of 40 people compared to perhaps 60 people decide what will become law. The very concept of this is dangerous to American democracy because a small group of people could block the majority of people's votes. This essentially diminishes the true meaning of American democracy. Indeed, as the Berkeley University goes on to explain, this becomes extremely dangerous and a stain on American democracy because letting a minority decide the will of the majority is not democracy. When we reflect upon today's question of whether or not the US should get rid of its filibuster, we see that the answer is absolutely yes, because it harms the US government. First, by reducing the need for political deliberation and debate. Second, by leading to a lack of productivity. And finally, because it is fundamentally undemocratic. Although the 1837 Whigs may have thought that their idea was genius at that time, it turns out that their idea was simply undemocratic.